Hello and welcome. It's time for another episode of the Cole Memo. In today's episode, I will be having a returning guest. I will just say that if you want to check out their book, I'm displaying it on my screen right now. I've personally read it. It's great. It's called Behind the Pole: The Truth About Exotic Dancing. If you'd like to see us talk about this book and other experiences, I think the easiest way to find those interviews is to go to colememo.com/sex. Today we'll be talking about a slightly different topic today, and to do that, I'm just going to bring Torin back up and on stage to reintroduce yourself, if you don't mind, and then we can introduce the topic at hand, if that sounds good. Torin, welcome back to the show.
Hi, I'm
Yeah.
I go by Torin Rochelle here. I recently gave some information about the legal sex industry in Nevada, and I wrote a book about the stripping industry all over the place on what to expect and what it's really like and how it is. And today I'm going to talk about another subject. And by the way, this could be a trigger warning for some. It's called military sexual trauma. It's a form of PTSD with military, or as a result of military sexual trauma, and how frequent it happens, how common it is, and it has been, what they're doing about it, and finally now, and I'm going to talk about the impact that it's had on my life for the past 37 years.
Cool. And I'll just give you the floor. I just want to say before we get into it, thank you for being willing to come forward and talk about this. And if you're listening to this and would like to contribute to this conversation, I think the best way for folks that are listening to do that, because I'm looking to give more people the ability to share their experiences, whether positive or negative, go to colememo.com/contact. Reach out to me from there and we can get you on air. Without further ado, I'll give you the stage to talk about what you'd like to talk about today.
Okay, well, I will first tell the audience what military sexual trauma is, and I'm going to be reading because I can't remember it all. So what it is military sexual trauma, or MST, refers to sexual assault or threatening sexual harassment experienced during military service. And the military sexual trauma movement, MSTM, started in 2018 as a grassroots platform to combat this issue, advocating for legislative and institutional reforms. There's military sexual encompasses sexual assault or repeated threatening sexual harassment experienced during military service. Excuse me. It can occur on or off duty, on or off post, as perpetrators can be anyone, including military personnel or civilians, superiors or subordinates, strangers, friends, or intimate partners. The term MST is used by the Department of Veterans Affairs to describe these experiences. MST can have a lasting impact on individuals, potentially leading to mental and physical health problems and difficulties with relationships and social functioning. The VA offers services and helps veterans who have experienced MST, including treatment for any physical or mental health condition related to MST, which is provided free of charge regardless of when the MST occurred. Now, the MST movement was founded in 2018 by Janelle Marina Mendez, a veteran of the United States Marine Corps, as a grassroots platform to combat sexual violence and assault in the U.S. military. The MSTM advocates for legislative and institutional reforms to prevent sexual violence and harassment in the military and to create greater accountability for perpetrators. The MSTM movement also allows service members to report sexual harassment and abuse online, and it seeks to extend state veterans benefits to veterans who received bad paper discharges as consequent of reporting the MST. Are there any questions?
Not yet. I mean, I have a few, but maybe not relevant just yet.
So I'm going to talk about first, get it out of the way, my experience in the military. I was a military brat. My stepfather was in the Air Force, and I grew up on Air Force bases, and it was always military, military, military. So I decided when I graduated high school, I joined the Army. I didn't join the Air Force because I wanted to do something on my own. And my stepdad, I was a rebel teen. So at the age of 18, I sat in my basement for a few months after graduating, wondering what I'm going to do. And one day I went to see my aunt on the other side of town, and walked into an Army recruiter. I told her that I was joking and pretending, but I actually joined the Army. No one ever mentioned anything about sexual harassment or MST. However, they did have to change me to a woman recruiter because the man who was married, he was an E6, the first recruiter asked me out. So that's where it all started.
What's an E6? Sorry.
He's a staff sergeant on the.
Oh, okay.
He's a non-commissioned officer. When you get to E5, you're a non-commissioned officer. You're basically like a leader or a supervisor. Then you have commissioned officers, which are the lieutenants and up. Warrant officers, which is warrant. They're kind of a different department there. They focus on the job. And when you go in as a private, you're enlisted. I got to basic training in January of 1984. Never really had any harassment there. It was an all-woman company. They kept the women together. I had some male drill sergeants. There were rumors that the drills were screwing a couple girls. I didn't know about it, didn't follow up, didn't happen to me, except for when I went to kitchen duty one day called KP, where you have to go wash dishes one day. I had another cook hit on me and try to get me to go up in the ceiling in the attic of the mess hall and have sex. I said no, went back, but that was all. When I went to AIT at Fort Lee, Virginia in March of 1984, there was rumors of a maintenance guy. He was an old rusty E7. We were putting together wall lockers, and I was inside the wall locker on the top shelf, bracing my feet on the bunk, trying to screw some screws in. And he walks up. He's like, "Oh, I like that position. I can see all the way to your tonsils." And I was a private. I was embarrassed. And I heard that he did it to other girls, but we were too afraid to report it. I got to Germany in May of 1984. I turned 19 in basic training. My first relationship was a gentleman named Melvin Scruggs, who I married. He was 21. He was in the same platoon. He was African American. When I met him, it was like a sudden connection, and we started hanging together because we were two kids basically in Germany, just partying and having fun. A lot of people didn't like our relationship because it was a mixed relationship. So we got a lot of harassment from our superiors. I got picked on, and African-American girls, other soldiers threatening to fight me and throwing ice at me in clubs. And I had, and he had the superiors, like officers, try to work him to death, and they would harass him too until they put him in another section to work. Now, where I worked, in Hanau, Germany, from 1984 to December 1989 was considered a Class 9 warehouse. It was off post on a separate post itself with other warehouses. It used to be an old German train station during World War II. We had glass ceilings with we didn't really have a ceiling. All the glass was broke. There was a railroad track going through and computer rooms, and they put me in the computer room. Well, in order to work there, we had to take turns pulling 24-hour duty on the location, especially when there were other units in field exercises, because we gave away vehicle parts. And when their vehicles broke down or their tanks and stuff, it was an O2 priority, which was first priority. They had to come all hours. So someone had to spend the night there. And usually they would have two of us, one from the return department and one from the O2 department. But normally if one of us had a car and lived off post, they would, the person bought me dinner and said, "I want to go home. Call me if you need me." So I was there alone at a warehouse. It was on a Saturday for 24 hours, pulling duty. Now, we had landlines, but they didn't work well in Germany. The phones did not always work. We didn't have cameras or surveillance. There was no security guards going around. You had one gate guard and the post was closed. I was pretty much alone on post. I had put on my PT uniform, which was a yellow jumpsuit, and got in a sleeping bag that night. I wasn't feeling well. I was cramping. And I believe it was 5 guys showed up. And to back it up a bit, I was also a newlywed. My husband and I had went to Denmark to get married and came back. We were in the process of looking for housing off post and, start our lives together. Well, 5 guys showed up. I was asleep. I opened the computer room door, got out of my cot, and I thought it was a routine part thing, but I was assaulted by all of them. And I cannot remember every single detail. All I remember was I was praying that I could live through this and it would stop. It was dark. I didn't get a good visual. They didn't have uniforms with names, but they were obviously soldiers. And it wouldn't matter if I screamed, nothing. I just dissociated and blacked out. And there was a few other things. I was on my period, and when they left, and I laid there in a ball. I remember one of them kissed me on the forehead before he walked away, and they kept calling me mud shark, which was a term for white women that dated black guys. I guess it was some sort of punishment because of who I married. And I didn't know who they were. It's almost like somebody sent them. I wasn't well liked because of my relationship, even though I maxed everything, did my job, showed up for work, wore the same uniform. I wasn't well liked because of my personal life. And that's what started it. They took my sanitary pad and stuck it on the wall. And, that's the one thing and it's hard to remember faces, but that was like the worst part of it all. And all I could think, well, I guess it's about time. I've had every other kind of harassment. Since after I went to Germany, I was there 4 years. The minute I got there, I would be hit on by superiors. I had a health issue, which turned out to be asthma, and I was having stomach problems. I think it was from the stress. I would go to what's called sick hall. It's a clinic where we can sign a roster and not go straight to work. You go to the clinic, and it's kind of like an urgent care. It's just medics. And one of the medics hit on me, offered me 72 hours bed rest if he could come to my room on my lunch. So now with my health issue, where was I supposed to go, and what was I supposed to do? I also had superiors, like all the way up to my platoon sergeant, who were all married, hitting on me, knocking on my barracks door. And this wasn't just me. It was any other women in the barracks. It was a co-ed barracks. We had female roommates, but, the next door could be guys. And they would leave the enlisted club, which was next to us, drunk, and come knock on my door in the middle of the night. Men, E7 and down. They would always harass me, make derogatory comments. They called me a high dollar item. I don't know why. It caused problems with my relationship. There were so many examples I could give. I couldn't even go stand at the bus stop. One time someone was hitting on me. It made me so upset. I literally went behind the shack and threw up. It was constant. And it just got to the point that I shut down there. I refused to work. I started making up excuses not to go to work at the warehouse. We had to catch rides to the warehouse because it was far away. I didn't have a license in Germany. We either rode in the back of a 2.5 ton, what's called a deuce and a half truck, or we could catch a ride with a coworker. It was like an hour away or but it was constant from the day I got into permanent party. Anybody, the supply clerk hit on me, the armory guy hit on me, told me what they wanted to do to me. Even when I was dating my husband before, they would whisper to him, when can I have her? They gave him a hard time, made his life a living hell, made him angry. But after the main event, the assault, we were not really schooled. I didn't know I could call MPs or who I could call. I couldn't call anyone that day because the phones weren't working right. I told my husband, and he didn't believe it at first. And his mouth flew open and he was in shock. And I was crying. And we went to my platoon or my squad leader because we were told from the beginning, always go to your chain of command. I went to my platoon sergeant, the lieutenant at the warehouse said, I don't know what to do. And the squad leader, hang on, I'll handle it. And we waited a while and like a couple of weeks, and we're like, what are you going to do? And they told me, well, you don't know who they are or how it happened. We're not even sure it happened. I wasn't directed to a hospital or anything. I didn't know what to do. And I just kept going and figured since I was on my period, I know I wasn't pregnant. Eventually, I shut down at work. I didn't want to go to that warehouse anymore. I quit working. I just sat there in front of my computer and stared, and I quit answering the phone, you too. And they got mad and tried to put me out of the Army. But instead, the acting first sergeant, he was acting. We were in between first sergeants and company commanders at the time. They moved me to the orderly room to be a clerk, and all I did was sit in a chair next to the actual clerk and was like a gopher until I got my clearing papers, because they kept saying, you'll be stuck in Germany longer if you pursue this. There's really nothing to investigate. You don't have names. They threw it back on me like it was my fault. And my husband stood there and then he started to blame me somewhat and started cheating, and our intimate life went to hell. I got to Fort Lewis. Well, I went to Kansas City first to see my family when I left Germany to go to Fort Lewis, Washington. And shortly after, I started having really bad stomach cramps, and to the point I would dream that I was having a baby. And I'd go to the sick hall there, and all they do is give me some kind of, I forgot what it's called, some medicine, where I couldn't go out, doxycycline, where I couldn't go out in the sun. It didn't help it. So I went to the Fort Lewis hospital, and I was put in the hospital for a week with a constant stream of antibiotics. What had happened is I had gotten pelvic inflammatory disease from this and didn't know it. Well, after I cleared that up, a military doctor told me that, well, my chance of having babies is very slight because you have scar tissue now. So I went off the pill. Why have side effects from the pill if I can't have babies? Well, needless to say, I got pregnant with my daughter right after. I had, and my daughter was a result of an SA or sexual assault or a sexual coercion, I'll call it, because my husband went out one night and was with another woman behind my back. The woman pressed rape charges on him, and we split up for a while. I went to a friend's house to be consoled and stay there a few days. And this E7 in my company heard about it. Single older guy came in, slid right in. And keep in mind, I was like 23 then. I was still young and immature. We got drunk and ended up sleeping together. Not really my choice. We did it twice because I kind of, after the assault and everything, it just really messes your head up. I got pregnant. I went back to my husband, had a little girl, and found out that my current husband was never ready to get married. He was messing around with anybody and everybody. It was quite embarrassing. And it got to the point that he would leave Friday night, say he was going to go get some cigarettes and come back Sunday or Monday morning in time to go to work. So that was my life. And I was trying to work and raise a kid. I went to church a lot, came home towards the end of my Fort Lewis tour or time, and he had moved out. He took everything and left with a note. We just don't get along anymore and blah, blah, blah. Left me with the baby, holding everything. And a few months later, he came back. I let him back because I came on orders to go to Korea for a year, and you can't take your kid or your family. And she would have been 9 months old. So I had this baby, and I had to get out of the service, which I wasn't too angry. I found out my husband was always screwing around, and he didn't even want to be married anymore. I don't know if that was my fault from the assault or if this is something he always did. Anyway, I got out. I tried, and that's my experience in the Army. There was a lot more little details I'm not going to get into because I'm all over the place with times and dates because it happened almost 40 years ago. But every day I couldn't sleep. I had people calling my house in the middle of the night when I moved off post, whispering they wanted to sleep with me, and they kept harassing my phone. I'd have to take my phone off the hook. I missed an alert because, they can call you in the middle of the night for an Army practice because I took my phone off the hook. I unplugged it. I got in trouble for that. In Germany, I was considered a bad soldier because I shut down and I made a complaint and they were trying to get rid of me. The only thing that saved me was I was a short timer and I had orders for Fort Lewis. Nobody had any sympathy. They were calling me whore. Guys would yell mud shark out their windows in the barracks when I'd try to walk through post and make crappy comments and, just degrading. And this was all the women. And these were higher up, supervisors, squad leaders, platoon sergeants. I had dependent wives threatening my life when I did absolutely nothing with their husbands because their husbands would hit on me. And it was a daily thing. The minute I walked out of my room, and a lot of us girls stuck together. We didn't talk about it. We knew it was happening. We were just, trying to get through the day. It got to the point it was just a normal thing to be hit on. I had truck drivers coming into the warehouse hitting on me and everything else, and then smashing my name and calling me horrible names because I didn't want it. And at Fort Lewis, when I got pregnant, they tried to put me out of the Army. Well, pregnant women shouldn't be in the Army. I said, well, what about these dependent men whose wives are pregnant and they get leave and the Army takes care of them? But they didn't want to hear it. And I had plenty of first sergeants and higher ups tell me women shouldn't be in the Army. Whenever I'd complain about something or harassment, they basically told me I had no business being there in the first place. Even though I did my job, like I said, I maxed my PT test. I was an expert on the rifle. My uniform was always on point. I passed my job test. I went to the E5 board, got the highest score out of everybody. And it was never good enough because I was a woman. I was nothing but a hoe to them. We were whores. They'd call us hookers too. Yeah. But that was my experience and many others' experience in the military. And I got out, could never come back on post again because I didn't have an ID, could never talk to anyone, didn't know anything about the VA or what it had to offer. I didn't find out about the VA hospital, how it took care of veterans till about 1996 when a friend took me to the VA to get a medical card because I was a single mom. I had asthma really bad and I couldn't get medical care. I couldn't afford it. And I was suffering for years because of that alone, to the point it gave me a hiatal hernia from coughing. Got a VA card. The first time I used it, this was in Kansas City, I broke my foot. Had to drive myself with a broken foot to the VA. They brought a wheelchair with no foot. It was a broken wheelchair. It had no footrest. And I had my it was 9-year-old daughter pushing me around. And no one would see me. They wouldn't tell me where to go. It was racism. There was a lot of racism there. I was a minority at this VA. And I finally stopped a nurse and showed her my foot, told her I can't, no one's checking me in. And she took me straight to it. I got checked in, spent all day at the VA, got a big old bottle full of opioids, Vicodin, and another big old bottle full of Tylenol 3 with codeine. And I got a wooden shoe for a men's size 10 for the opposite foot and some crutches and sent out the door. My follow-up appointment was almost 2 years away. Coping, now we'll go to how I've coped with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah, and that was going to be my only question. I will give you a heads up, just in case the worst happened. I don't know if you saw my lights flickering earlier.
Uh-huh.
Apparently, I'm under a tornado warning.
Well.
Only saying that just in case we get disconnected. But yeah, that was really the only question I had cocked up. So it sounds like a natural transition. Yeah, let's talk about that. How have you been coping with this horrible experience? And I just wanted to say
Yeah.
obviously I don't have any control over this, but I'm just so sorry. This is such
Mhm.
a, I'm thankful that you've come forward to talk
Mhm.
about this. But I just felt like I needed to say that because
Oh.
usually you thank people for like yourself for their service, and I
Mhm.
do. I am thankful for your
Mhm.
service, but I am so sorry that our country failed you, frankly.
Yeah.
But anyways,
Mhm.
yeah, feel free to talk about how you've coped with this because
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
Well, just to back up a bit, one thing my goal in the military was I was saving money for college because they have great college programs, and I wanted to become an officer. I wanted to, I was going to go to my duty station, reenlist, and go to OCS. It was going to be a lifetime career for me until that all that happened and the harassment. I mean, I got harassed from women and men. And it was to the point that all of my TA-50, which is my sleeping bag, my field gear that I need if we go to war, was stolen. Someone cut the lock and stole it. And they would steal from me. They would cut me off. They would leave me, wouldn't give me a ride to work if I was the last one on, or I had to run in and go to the bathroom. I literally told them, hang on, I got to pee. It was the back of a deuce and a half. It was very bumpy. So before I got on, I ran in the door that was right there to pee, came out, and they were gone. But it was constant. Hang on. You have to excuse me. I'm a little dry.
All good, all good.
And and to tell you, here I was. I turned 19 in basic training in a foreign country across the water from anybody that loved me and cared about me and wanted to protect me. So it was just me. But getting out, I got out 2 years early because my husband couldn't deal with me anymore and he walked out. I came home from church one day and he moved out. It was just me and my daughter. I was scared. I couldn't go to the field because I had no one to keep her. So when they put me on levy for Korea, I got out in late December 1989. No, yeah, 1989. Our daughter was 9 months old and I tried to work a job. It took weeks to get a job. I did take some college courses when I got out to transition, but I still couldn't. And the two jobs I got, the first one was a paperwork job. I couldn't focus. I found out I couldn't concentrate. And here's where the PTSD symptoms come in. I couldn't absorb anything. And it was an easy job for anybody. I got fired. I was making too many mistakes. The second job was a corporate word processor, stuff I went to school for, computers, what I did in the military. I got fired a year later because same thing. I couldn't understand it. I would dissociate. It's like if you asked me to type in a 1, I might type a 7. I don't know why. And I would go back myself and find mistakes and everything. I couldn't absorb instructions. And I have a tendency to blurt stuff out. I would say inappropriate things, without thinking it was funny, but it wasn't, to them, sex stuff.
Yeah.
And I got fired, and that's where dancing came into play. I had already went in there to bust my husband, and I started dancing. I took up alcohol because I couldn't sleep at night. I just felt uneasy. I was heartbroken in the first place because of a divorce, and he remarried someone a week later and left me alone with what I thought was our daughter. Getting child support took a year. I had to go to the local Senate representative because some board enforcement, even though he had a job, wouldn't even start garnishing his wages so, I could have a quality of life. I was going to lose my apartment and everything. Danced for 9 years, stayed in a drunk stupor, and I fit in there because first I was drunk. I don't remember half the shit I did. I put in my book that, I drank a lot. And there were times I couldn't sleep at night or I have really horrible nightmares and I wake up. A lot of the nightmares replay the incident. I can barely see faces. And I wake up screaming. My screams wake up the whole house. They haven't even let up. I still have them. And a lot of the nightmares was.
You say you still have the nightmares?
Yes, I still have them from time. Sometimes the nightmares come in the form of demon-looking creatures standing over me, and it's scary as hell. And I have flashbacks. So I lost 2 jobs because I kept they thought I didn't care, and that because I couldn't absorb instructions. They would tell me something and I'd ask them the same question 2 minutes later. And they thought that was odd, that I just didn't, that I was on drugs. Even Suzette and Dennis at the ranches asked me when I started, was I on drugs? Because they were so overbearing, I would dissociate. And that's the biggest problem I've had, is dissociating. I worked for a county and an office, and I made so many errors, and I wasn't trying. I just couldn't focus. I would forget stuff. And all I wanted to do was go home and hide and have a drink. And another symptom besides the lack of sleep and the nightmares, and the drinking on weekends, and trying to raise a kid and trying to have a home and take care of everything, it was I isolated myself because I didn't know how to communicate with people anymore. I backed away from my family. They didn't understand me. I didn't tell them everything because I didn't think, I moved on. I ran away from the main incident. I moved on. I didn't think it had this kind of impact. I thought I was just weird. You don't know you have PTSD until, someone diagnoses you with it. I thought I just had a problem and I didn't know what it was. I thought I was a horrible person for years, even though I took care of a daughter and pets and tried to do everything right. I had 3 DUIs in my life, 10 years apart, because of this, and couldn't understand why they were arresting me. Couldn't understand why my coworkers hated me, and my family totally shunned me and shut me out finally. They're back in Kansas City, but they couldn't deal with me anymore. I just didn't know how to act, and I didn't have any girlfriends to hang out with or anything, no support system. It was me and my daughter. In 1994, my husband, who was married to someone else, was killed in a motorcycle accident. And I was devastated. I tried to get counseling and they put me on Prozac, but we never addressed the military because I just wasn't ready. I didn't think it was a problem at the time. It was just a way of life. And dancing was easy because I felt like I was groomed for it. I had less sexual harassment there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's insane. And now the backstory, I'm seeing the connection between your backstory, and where the book starts, and I wondered why your husband was there, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he didn't help with the MST. He was he had rape charges on him with a girl who was the police chief's daughter in Seattle. We hadn't been there a month yet, and it cost us $10,000. And I took him back because I don't know why I took him back. I was just scared. When you have so much trauma, you don't want to be alone. You get scared, and you don't make a lot of money. What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? And when I broke it off with him, I lost my apartment. He would play games with me and come in my apartment and steal stuff and not pick up our daughter. He did put his name on the birth certificate. He knew about the other guy and what happened. He didn't come by and get her, or he popped by unannounced, and I wouldn't let him in. He just played all kinds of head games with me. And then, I got a mouthful when I started stripping. Now I was a big whore. He told all of our friends, so they turned on me. And all the Army people, except for the one I think that reached out to you, her and I still stuck together because we had our babies around the same time. We both had daughters. And for the same reason, same way our daughters came. And I had to leave Seattle because I tried to kill myself. I put it in my book. A lot of it was where I was at dancing, but a lot of it was post-traumatic stress disorder. I just didn't understand what was happening to me when I was trying to do everything right. I just wanted to end it, and this is where it goes. It's true what they say about veterans ending their lives. I totally get it. You don't want to go on anymore. People tell you, thank you for your service. And I'm like, I don't even know what I did. And the main trigger was I went on my Facebook one day and there was a meme that said, women in the military are nothing but comfort women. And I lost it. I lost it. and it was the most horrible thing. I tried to go back to the VA in 2015 for my asthma. They put me on a 40 mile program where we could use our primaries if we were too far from a clinic. And I was using my primary. And then they realized, oh, you're 37 miles away from the clinic, not 40. So they just wiped me out of the system. And I sat there for days on the phone for hours being transferred everywhere. This is back to where the VA came in. I had to call the White House VA hotline as soon as Trump set it up. And the next day I was being reassessed. They just took me out, didn't call me, didn't tell anyone, wouldn't send me my prescriptions. I was suffering. And then they asked me at the clinic, do you think you have MST? And I'm like, what's that? And they're like, military sexual trauma. I said, yeah, I believe I do. And then the lady pops off, well, be careful. It could be used against you. And I'm thinking, how can that be used against me? So I kept it quiet for a while. I made it through the pandemic. And meanwhile, I have worked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 jobs, 10 different jobs since like 2000. And I'm not including when I had my own cleaning business, because it goes back to, I can't concentrate, and they think that I don't care. And the worse they come down on me, the worse it gets. I can't retain stuff. I can't hold a conversation, unless I'm interviewing and I know what I'm talking about. It's hard for me to even make small talk without being off the wall and people thinking I'm strange. I have an amazing sense of humor, but most of that is to cover up a lot of my pain. When stuff goes bad, I try to fight it with humor. So people thought nothing was really wrong with me. Well, the MST made sense. I started reading about it. And I realized I have it. And we went through the pandemic and I came back to work. I work for a casino. I'm in my 6th year there. I was talking to customers that were veterans with disability. And then my security guy came in who's a disabled veteran. And I was telling him how I can't handle this job. I also have anxiety attacks. The customers are giving me so much anxiety and he's the one that told me to file. And the first time I filed a year ago, I got 50% for my PTSD.
Oh, okay.
For MST. And I'm in trauma therapy now. It's my second kind of therapy I've been in. I'm in group trauma therapy. And all it really does, it helps me understand why I'm going through it, but I don't know how it erases the nightmares and stuff. They put me on a CPAP when I sleep and I can't wear it because it suffocates me. And I refused any kind of medicines. I don't want to walk around in a daze. And that's where I am now. But I have gone through job hell. My husband, or current partner today, I've known him since 8th grade. We were military brats together. We were best friends. He joined the Air Force, and then I joined the Army. We got together as a couple right before our 20-year reunion. And it's been 22 years we've been together. But his buddy statement, about me to send to the VA, talking about how I was really jealous at first. And I was, because of what I went through, with my husband and my marriage. So it's pretty much put a dent in my relationship now. I have a female sexual arousal disorder. I could go and meet a stranger and get aroused and have an affair and it'll last. But after a while, I get tired of it. But coming here home, I have a hard time with intimacy with him. And his health and the fact that he's older, it's a little easier on him, because when men get older, they get arousal problems and stuff too. But I have that. So it's hard for me to even have a relationship. And I always had to be drunk to have sex. It was just a thing to do when you're drunk. Hey, let's have sex. Woo. And I can't be in a house alone. I don't know why. There's times when my husband and son go to Oregon to see his dad. He lives on the beach. We have to take separate vacations because of our pets. And I work. And I think, oh, I'm going to buy junk food and lay in the middle of the bed and watch all the movies I want. No, this last time I had a meltdown. I almost blew my brains out. This was not even a year ago.
Wow.
I almost blew my brains out because the house was quiet. It wasn't dark. I was afraid. I had every window and door locked, every blind pulled. And I couldn't handle it. I called the crisis hotline for the first time. And it calmed me down enough that I could lay down and get through the night. And I feel bad because I put my kids and my family through hell. I was texting them goodbyes and everything. Just told them I couldn't handle it anymore. And it's hard to explain it. Luckily, a social worker called me the next day. Well, the day I did it was also the anniversary of the death of my first husband. And I was alone in the house. But every time I'd be alone in the house, I have to have animals sleep with me. I can't sleep in a bed alone either. Sometimes I'll crash in another room, but I have a dog and a cat that sleeps with me, and I can't be alone in the house. I get afraid. I lock everything, and even with everything locked, I'm checking under beds and closets, everything. And I talk on the phone, or I'll get really shit-faced before I can do it. That's a lot of the symptoms. Anger outbursts. I don't have friends very long because I push people away is what I do. If people get too close, I'm an open book. I overshare all the time. I'll tell you what I did on the toilet, just to hear myself talk. But as far as any intimate conversation or anything, it's really, it's hard for me to engage. So I'm very standoffish. I just started talking to my family a couple years ago when my brother died. I told my mom what happened, finally, what went on. And it's just hard to explain. I didn't want anything to do with my past in my high school. I felt ashamed. I felt like I failed. I felt like a failure in life. I guess a lot of people judge how you are in life by, how much money you make or your career. And no matter what kind of career I start dissociating. Then I get angry and I have a disdain for my coworkers who are probably mad at me. And then I start calling in sick a lot where I just don't want to be there. And then I end up quitting and I have to find another job and start over. Does that make sense?
I'm not going to sit here and say I understand because I don't, but I could see how that could happen and how, frankly, it would, I don't want to say be impossible to move on because I don't want people listening here to think that to get over this is impossible. But I guess I should say it could be very challenging to overcome that experience and to move past it,
It is. And you would tell people, they'd be like, you need to let it go and move on. You're not there anymore. And when I got a DUI, I had to go to therapy as court mandated or alcohol treatment. And the therapist was a man. This was in 2012. I tried to talk about what happened in the military, and he knew I had to be there. I couldn't leave, or he'd make a bad report on me and I'd have to start over or go back to court. He would tell me it's all my fault. I need to let it go. Gave me some stupid relaxation exercises, told me how bad I was to drive drunk. It was no help at all. It made it worse, as a matter of fact. I was glad to be released. And so I gave up. And I gave up on looking for therapists. Also, I was raising a daughter alone. And I tried therapy at a county mental health in Kansas City. And all they did was question my parenting ability. I was afraid they were going to take my daughter. And I was very dedicated to my daughter. I shielded her. I protected her from everything. I know because I drank at work and stuff. I didn't drink with her, beat her, nothing. She didn't want for anything. But because when he died, she got some good life insurance and, we were taking care of it finally. But I couldn't get help. And I had my son when she was 17. I just didn't have time. I didn't want to get my kids involved. I just kept my mouth shut and raised kids because the first thing that a lot of these therapists want to do is questioning your parenting. Next thing you know, social services is calling, and they want to find excuses to take your kid. And we all know that's true. Now, when I went to work at the ranches because I had to leave my county job, the errors were so bad, they called me in a PIP meeting with HR and the elected official. And it was very humiliating. I cried through the whole thing. I couldn't explain to him what was going on with me. I didn't know how, but it was PTSD. And there was a lot of drama in the office, and it was a hostile office with just 8 people. And that would trigger me every day when I walked in the door, and here would come the dissociation, here would come the anger outbursts. And then I didn't want to be there. And this was just a pattern with me. I know a lot of people are stronger and they can deal with it, but I was having triggers. The nightmares came back, the drinking, the hangovers, the DUI. I got out of there. So when I went to the ranches, it's funny because all the stuff I told you about the ranches, at first, it didn't faze me. And any normal person that would come in and see the pimp or the owner using the girls as a harem, fondling them in front of you and talking about sex all the time, that would bother people. I just let it just washed off. I was like, oh, whatever, this is life.
What does that mean, using them as a harem?
He would screw around with all of them. He treated all the working girls as his own personal harem. I mean, he would call you on the phone to get a driver to bring a certain girl to him, and an hour later, call a driver to bring him back.
Gotcha.
They'd have sex.
Gotcha.
And all that should have bothered me, all the sex talk and listening to negotiations, with the girl and the customers and what I was there for. And after a while, it did start getting to me because I started to realize that this isn't healthy, doesn't even pay enough, and I don't like the way I'm treated here. But back to military sexual trauma. My latest trigger, I thought I was doing good. I'm in therapy. I got my disability. I was a little relaxed. I thought I was on the road to recovery. And one morning, I work at a casino. I do everything. It's called Dottie's Casino. I work alone. I'm a bartender. I sell cigarettes. I'm the janitor, whatever they need, I'm there. One morning on my Monday, a cop pulled up in a uniform with a cop car. I thought it was a normal walkthrough, or maybe he wanted to show me a picture. Have you seen this? No, he was coming after me. What had happened was some 80-year-old man came in a week or two before, played, supposedly walked out and left a little money clip about this big there that was supposed to be made from a rare coin. He walked out and left it, came back a couple hours looking for it. I didn't see it. And he said, okay. And he went out and called the cops on me. And this cop came in a week later, interrogating me, calling me a thief, telling me to take it back. He was loud, like I killed someone. Told me to take it back and give it back. He knows I got it. He has me on video, putting it in my pocket, blah, 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 blah. Wouldn't give me the times, dates, names, nothing. Customers were standing around watching. My boss was standing there, didn't say anything. This went on for 15 minutes. And I blinked, and when I opened my eyes for one split second, I saw a man in an Army uniform standing there. Because these cop uniforms are Army green. They're not too far from the original. And my stomach, I started getting sharp pains in my stomach. My chest started tightening up. And I got lightheaded, like my blood pressure shot up. He said, well, today's my Friday. I'll be back Tuesday, and you might be going to the sheriff's office with me. Over something, somebody left. And that was a big trigger for me. I defecated myself. Ran in the bathroom, cleaned myself up, told my boss I needed to go home. And she said, I don't think that's a good idea. I had to work the rest of the week after that. I called the sergeant. The sergeant treated me the same way. I took him to internal affairs, and internal affairs investigated because it was excessive. It was public humiliation and excessive force. And it triggered me, and I felt like it put me right back to square one. This was just in January. So here I thought I was going to go to court for something I didn't do, or go to jail, and then I was going to be assaulted again, and that these cops are corrupt, and I was going to be in their hands. I was scared to death.
Are you saying this was like this recent January, like
Yeah,
4 months ago?
January 17th. Yes.
Wow.
So I went to the VA and right now my disabilities and appeals, I'm asking for a higher rating because I don't think I can work like this anymore. I get lots of triggers at work, from a rude customer to a guy hitting on me. Um, I have bodily functions that it affects. It affects my sleep and it makes me physically ill. My chest tightens up and my blood pressure goes up. And it still happens to this day. And the fact that I'm in therapy over it, it's happening more now because it's finally come to the surface. Me and thousands of other, maybe hundreds and thousands of other men and women are going through this. Some of them just got out of the service. I have another friend I'm trying to get to contact you. She was in service recent. I think she got out in like 2013. 5 kids, has MST so bad. I mean, she was doing the same stuff I was doing at work. We worked side by side. She finally got 100% because it's so bad. It's horrible. And a lot of these women that leave the military that deal with this go in the sex industry. I danced beside a lot of women that got out of the service one time or another. All we really did, we just asked each other, when were you in? Where were you? What'd you do? We didn't talk about anything. It was dressing room talk. Even at the brothels, I had a woman show up in the middle of the night in her Army uniform, just ETS'd, ready to work. And there's streetwalkers, escorts, all of them that were in the military. There is a famous brothel worker who's my age, blonde hair, who was on the Cat House series, and her name has the military in it. She was in the military.
Yeah, I actually met her once.
Yep, I know. It ruins you, and it makes you embarrassed. You know, you have to understand, a lot of guys come with PTSD, with missing limbs, or PTSD, or medical problems from combat, and a Purple Heart. I didn't get a Purple Heart for being raped. I got nothing. I got brushed under the rug, told I was a bad soldier, and someone tried to put me out of the military. And they didn't want to hear about what happened because they didn't think it really happened. And it's embarrassing. I mean, I tell them I'm disabled through the military, and they ask, oh, where'd you fight? And I just tell them, I shake my head, it was an inside job. My own soldiers that I don't think they were in my unit. I don't recall seeing anyone like that. Fellow military members from the U.S., thought that was justifiable because of who I married. And I had a lot of racist comments too. There was from both sides.
Yeah, that's super heavy. What, I don't mean to take us off track, but I've just been curious, like, what has made you feel comfortable to come forward with this story? And the reason I ask that is I hope, it makes other people feel comfortable, because it sounds like you've suppressed this for quite a while. Or when you have tried to open up about it, you've been told you're a liar, you're part of the problem. So I'm just curious.
Well, it's been 30-something years, and I'm still battling it. And I went into a group on Facebook called Military Sexual Trauma Survivors. Saw a lot of women, some of their stories. Some of them are very squeamish. They don't want to talk yet, but they're there. And I realized that, and then when I heard about the MST movement and telling me it would be used against me, and I'm thinking, this is a real thing. Back in college, I went to college shortly after I got out. My sociology professor actually asked me, what sticks out most as a woman in the military. He kept being fascinated that I was a woman in the military. So I know now he knew what was going on. And one day I just broke out and told him I had to take a final on another day because I had something else on my schedule. And he was walking me to the room, and I said, I'm a stripper on the side. I don't tell many people because I'm going to school. The Army's paying for this, and I'm supporting my daughter. But I have less sexual harassment in a strip club than I did in the Army. And he just held his head down, didn't say anything. And the conversation ended there. I sat down, took my test. He gave me an A for the class. But I think he already knew, because this man, sociology, had been to Africa, Germany, and everything. I think he knew it. He didn't ask me anything else. I wouldn't have been ready to talk about it anyway, because people made me crazy. And what didn't help is my husband was crazy. He was a player. I found out through the years, I found out he had a son. About 4 years ago, I found out he had a son conceived and born while we were married. And a lot of women have come out asking where he's at, trying to apologize to me. And he had done a lot of stuff in Germany, like when I was in charge of the cigarette ration cards, because, we had to have a ration card if we wanted to buy cigarettes and alcohol on post. We could only get so much a month, and they'd mark it off. Because a lot of people in Germany would buy Marlboros and sell them to the Germans. They were very popular and quite profitable. I was in control of the ration cards, and he stole a handful. It was a controlled item. I lost my security clearance and I was kicked out of the orderly room, had to go back to the warehouse. And I found that out years ago, that it was him. And oh man, I just find out all the time, little surprises. He was part of the MST. Just the harassment. I was locked in an apartment. We had an apartment in Germany. And in Germany, if you walk out of the apartment, it locks automatic. You have to have a key to get in. And if you talk on the phone, of course, this was the mid 80s, it had a key. And you could take the key with you, and you can't make phone calls because it would have a toll. When you called someone, it would click how many pfennigs you owned. So you knew what your phone bill. And when you called the US, it would just, He would go Friday and stay gone all weekend, lock the phone, take the keys, so I couldn't leave the apartment until he came back, because I would be locked out. I was on the second floor. I couldn't go out. No food, just tap water and a TV with one station. And he'd come back Sunday night or Monday morning, and I would be a mess. The final straw there was I had some Tilex cleaner with bleach. I got tired of it. He did it again. I couldn't go anywhere, and I had lost my mind. I opened up his trunk, the closet, and his suits that were hanging there. He had a whole closet full of suits. I had this much room with a few things because he was taking our money and buying his clothes so we could go out. I sprayed Tilex all over it and on his shoes. And I poured Pine Sol and water in his shoes. And that's when he kicked me out, and I went back to the barracks. And I still married the fool because my head was screwed up. I saw him as some sort of protection from everybody else because he was a big guy, but he was really the main problem. So I was there with him. He was a narcissist.
Yeah. And I'm asking this question, you sort of already touched on it, but I just want to ask it directly because, not that any of this makes sense, but some people might be wondering if you were sexually assaulted, like, how did you find yourself in the sex industry? And again, I feel like you sort of answered it because you said you had trouble doing other work and everything else. But yeah, I'm just curious your perspective on that, because anecdotally, I've heard that that's not unique. Other women that are sexually assaulted end up in sex work, not because they want to, but just because it's like, it feels like it's the only option. But I'm just curious, like, from your perspective,
Well, what happened was it started out, like I said in my book, that I'm sorry, I get choked up talking about this stuff. I thought I was ready, but
it's okay. If you want to take a break, we can.
No. I went into the club originally to bust him because I heard through a grapevine that all of our checks were bouncing. We had no money in our account. Bills weren't getting paid. A friend put a bug in my ear that he was going to strip bars. So I went to one on a Sunday night. They wouldn't let me in as a customer, so I told them I was looking for a job. And I sat there filling out an application. This particular one, I didn't write my real name. I took my time watching the door. I was going to ambush him when he came in. He never showed up that night, but I learned a lot about it. They actually wanted to lend me clothes to audition then, but I wasn't ready. It was a joke to me. I thought, I'll never do this. A couple months later, he ran out again, and he was living with another chick. He had somebody, and he had a good job. I was struggling. The job I had wouldn't pay bills. Wouldn't pay bills. I was sitting in an apartment with no electricity and no phone, no landline, because I paid rent and I paid a lot for daycare. It took me losing that second job. Well, I was on the verge of losing it, and I knew it. And so I went to a club. I went around the store to this sex shop, bought clothes, and I auditioned, and I started making decent money. And that's how I started doing it. There was nothing else. Even though I went to school, I went to a 2-year degree in office management and stuff and accounting. Everybody wanted experience, and they wanted me to start out $7, $8 an hour, and that just wasn't covering it. And it was a miserable life, and car running out of gas, my car breaking down. My car was eventually wrecked. I didn't have one then. I went into the club again, a different club, and just started dancing. My first night, I made $600. That was my rent and electric, and I just figured this was it. And at first it was like a dream come true, and it didn't do anything. I mean, all these jobs and dissociation and the way I was treated because of how I was, because I couldn't help it, it just rolled PTSD like compound interest to the point, like I said, less than a year ago. I tried suicide in the 90s, got my stomach pumped, moved back to Kansas City because I was afraid he was going to try to take my daughter again. And I tried another time on a New Year's Eve because I was alone and kind of feeling sorry for myself. But all I did was take a bunch of pills and I threw them up and just woke up feeling like crap. And then less than a year ago, I was alone in the house, and I almost took it and I was afraid. And I had a couple drinks to calm my nerves. I wasn't hammered. I called the hotline, I can't do this, Why are they saying it must still be held against you? I got a file. I can't take this anymore. And so they rushed me into trauma therapy, and I made it through the night. But I had a gun ready to go.
Have they explained to you, or has anybody said what that person meant when they said it'd be used against you? Like, is that just something they said, or is that a real thing? I'm asking for people that might be listening right now. Can it be used against you?
Everyone I talked to in the VA and everything, and they don't understand why it was said to me like that. They don't understand it. They said, no, we don't understand why. Maybe she was talking from her personal experience, but I went ahead and filed. I filed for that and my asthma and my back. I have really bad back pains since the Army, and I broke my tailbone in the Army, or just ruptured it. I don't think it was broke. I just had to wear tennis shoes and not do PE for a while. They never really treated serious stuff. And my asthma, for instance, was never diagnosed in the Army. They thought I was faking it because I went so much and because I didn't have a fever. And they would just give me a cold pack and send me back to work. And it would be when it got so bad, it went into bronchitis and pneumonia, that I would get referred to the hospital, and I'd just get some pills and a couple days bed rest, and it would start over. I didn't get diagnosed with asthma until a year or two after I got out of the Army. It was doing it again. I thought I had pneumonia and went in, and the doctor came in, "How long have you had asthma?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And I asked my mom, "Mom, do I have asthma?" She said, "Well, you did when you were a baby because you were allergic to feather pillows." But I'm like, I haven't seen a feather pillow for years. This is stupid. And you have to understand, my mom was a raging alcoholic then. She drank a lot too. And she used to make up some woo-woo stuff that I never believed her, but that's another story. I kept having health issues and mental issues in the Army, and they said it was me. And when I had a baby, tried to throw me out then. And I ended up just chaptering out myself because I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't have a plan or nothing. I've never lived a civilian life until I got out. In fact, one time I was constantly going to this urgent care, this walk-in clinic, which was civilian, and getting all these bills back. And I was in debt because I didn't know I had to pay for it. My daughter cut her finger and I took her and I got a big bill. All they did was put a Band-Aid on it. It was a hard time transitioning to civilian life. And just, it was just really, really hard. And nobody had your back. And all my family told me, so you shouldn't have married a black man. I mean, I got some nasty letters in the mail when I was in Germany and I told them about him. They didn't stop. We got married in Denmark in 87 so we could PCS together, went to Fort Lewis, and the whole time he wasn't a husband anyway. He's all part of it. And he injured me physically during, doing the deed several times because he was angry. It was practical rape with him. And I went with it because I thought I was his wife. I was very young and naive. Think back when you were a teenager, how you thought about life and the world. I never knew men cheated on their wives. I thought it was just horrible. I couldn't believe it, and marriage changed everything in people, but it doesn't. So I went years fighting that. And besides that, the drinking kind of numbed me, so I didn't want to think about it. I slowed down drinking a lot by 99%. I don't, and now I'm just dealing with it because I feel like I can't work anymore. I'm trying to leave my job because I have triggers every single day. And I come home upset. I mean, if my husband was standing here, he'd tell you a lot of times when I get up in the morning to go to work or when I come back, he pretends like he's asleep. Because wow. I'm always pissed off and stressed, and I always have something to bitch about. It could be part of a PTSD thing is a little thing could happen. Someone could question, is this price correct? How are you overcharging me? You're the only one that overcharges me. And I threw a fit. She wouldn't take a receipt for one thing. It was partially her fault. It's the third time she came in doing that, but it's minor. Instead of letting it roll and moving off, I wrote an incident report. I called dispatch. I called for her 86ing. And for the rest of the week, that's all I talked about. That's not normal. It's like if someone road rages me and flips me off, I'm angry for the rest of the month. And I'm looking for that person. I'm trying to put spells on them and everything else, wishing their death. Yeah. That's all part of the trauma response because I believe that everything I went through, especially the main event is what I call it. I feel like it was brushed under the rug like it was nothing. And people telling me, even therapists, that I need to let it go and asking me, basically trying to make me look like a bad parent. They wanted to ask me about my parenting like they were going after the only thing I was alive for. I have 2 kids. My daughter was born in 89 in the military. My son was born in 2006. So they're 17. I spent 36 years raising kids. I didn't want to put them in jeopardy because they think I'm too crazy. And my kids are fine. My son's in college right now. He earned a scholarship, and my daughter's doing great. I probably my trauma did rub off on them a little bit because I overcompensated for them. But as far as abusing and, putting them in danger, that never happened.
Yeah. Do you have advice for others? I know you're still really working through this, but I wanted to make sure to ask you that, especially for people listening.
My advice to others is stay strong. You're not alone. There's a lot of us, and we'll be happy to try and talk to you or email you and support you, and understand that it wasn't us, it was them. It happened to most of us. happened to a lot of us, almost all of us, men too. I've talked to men that have gone through it. Stay strong. Make the VA help you. File for disability because you deserve it. Keep filing for more. File for restitution. There is a bill up in Congress or wherever in DC. It hasn't gained much momentum, but I forgot the name of it. I should have looked it up, but they're trying to get us back pay with disability from the day we left service. It probably won't pass, but I think we deserve it because they completely wasted our time and ruined our lives. No one warned us when we went in as teenagers. Got to watch these men. You could get raped. Got to watch for sexual harassment. It's normal. Nobody told us. And I've had people tell me, well, you should know going there with all that, you're going to get harassed. No, I didn't know. I was a teenager. The commercials said, be all you can be, and had all this exciting stuff. It didn't say anything about women being harassed. No one said women don't join. You know, I was going to be one of the team. I didn't know this was going to be happening. I was floored. Most of the time, I couldn't believe that my married squad leader would hit on me, or my married platoon sergeant would. I was in the field one day, and this was in Germany, and I was on guard alone out, on the perimeter. My platoon sergeant came and tried to kiss me out of the blue. And I'm like, whoa, my husband or my boyfriend at the time was in another platoon. He wasn't too far away. I didn't want to tell him because he would have gotten violent with the guy and could have gone to prison. So I kept it quiet because I didn't want to hurt him. But I had no intention on, and there were times when him and I broke up because we were really young, and I did date someone else, but I was dating them. I wasn't screwing around my superiors, and it didn't work. And I'd go back with Melvin, my husband, and we were back and forth. It distorted my whole boundaries. It distorted my whole view as a relationship. And then Melvin died. That was just another trauma on top of it. And that was, we were divorced, but that was traumatic for me and my daughter. I had to work through that too. So there were a lot of other things that I had to work through before I could dig into the core of it, which was the military. Because like I said, it'll roll PTSD like compound interest, You lash out at someone, you have an issue, and they don't understand it, and they lash out to you, and they fight back, and you don't know, why are you doing this to me, sort of deal. It's never ending, and now, like the nightmares and the trouble. I always wake up around 1:30 in the morning. I think that's when the main event happened. I always wake up around that time till about 3-ish, and it's rough because sometimes I go to work with just 3 or 4 hours sleep. And I have a headache, and then it makes me irritable,
Yeah, and then that snowballs in and of itself, not being rested and such, mm-hmm. Yeah.
But advice to other women, keep getting help. I know I have a busy life. I will happily message or talk to you, I'll do what I can to help, but you get yourself help, and that you're not alone. This is a common thing that needs to end. We really need restitution until the day we left service because our lives have been ruined. All that college money I saved, went to college, got me nowhere because of my mental issues. I made straight A's in college, by the way, but going out and into the world and practicing, I should be running a hospital office doing medical billing and coding, but no way. I'm a bartender, and I've struggled financially ever since I got out because of that, because of having to leave jobs and having trouble finding new jobs. Most of the jobs I get are the ones that hire anyone and everyone, like the brothels. And there's so many of us out there. I sure hope they reach out to you after this. You could do a whole segment on it. There's some women that are just not ready to talk about it, and some that want to talk about it. But I thought if I do it first, because I brought it up, maybe I could post one on that MST site, because a lot of people are asking, and they can watch it, and maybe they'll feel more comfortable. It's worse than being called a prostitute to get out of the service, and people say thank you for your service, and all you can really do is shake your head, like you were nothing in the service. I felt like a burden after all that, and I felt useless.
Yeah, that's like I say, a very heavy topic, and I do hope that people that have gone through this hear you. That you're not alone. Like you say, there are groups, that you can join. And do you encourage people like you've done to like seek out therapy? Um, yeah.
Yes, yes. When they're ready to seek out therapy, when they feel safe. I didn't feel safe seeking therapy when I was raising my kids. I didn't even know that it had this big of an impact on me until I read my husband and my daughter's buddy statement for the VA investigation on my claims. I didn't know I had this kind of impact. And here's another thing that happens to me. I'm very OCD. I have trouble sitting still. I rock in my chair. I shake my leg when I'm sitting. When I'm at home doing nothing, I can't do nothing unless I'm drinking or I switch to edibles to calm my nerves, which helps. And on an edible, I can't sit still through a movie. I'm constantly cleaning. I never feel like my home or anything is clean enough. I'm constantly rearranging. A lot of that's from doing inspections and stuff in the military, I guess. I get nervous when my shoes aren't aligned. And it drives my husband and son crazy. I know it does. Because I'm always bitching about, something in the house, which truthfully, there's really nothing wrong in the house. We have a nice house. I hate clutter, but I always get paranoid if someone's going to come and look at it. And we haven't had company in years. I mean, would you come visit me like this?
Well, that definitely sounds like a carryover from service where you're worried that somebody's going to come in. I know people in the service, and um, one individual I know was also sexually assaulted. I don't know if they're going to be comfortable enough to speak on that, but to your point, they have told me that one of their sources of anxiety is like those room checks where they'd come in and see how clean your room is, and they'd basically look for something wrong.
Right. And
Yeah.
I was always called lazy in the military, and I worked, I did stuff, but they would push me harder. They just push and push and push. And now I can't sit still. I always feel like I have to be doing something or I'm wasting my life, whether it be crocheting or organizing a pantry. I mean, before I talked to you, I just reorganized my shoes. And it's part from the military, but the sexual trauma, uh, what we call it on a metaphysical side is, and this happens to any rape or molest victim. It's not just military women. Anybody who's sexually abused or assaulted, it comes in so many forms. Even a word like "I want to see you naked" could traumatize the wrong person. And it hasn't. What we call is it opens up to have a Jezebel spirit enter your body. We call it the Jezebel spirit because you notice that a lot of people who are abused, they lose their boundaries. They do enter the sex industry to make money, and they're quite good at it. And a lot of them that are promiscuous, a lot of them that cheat on their spouses. It's called the Jezebel spirit. Your boundaries get mixed up. I love this guy. I spend my life with him, but I feel dirty having sex. It's a pure relationship, but I've never cheated on him. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a cheater, but I could see this guy over here and probably fuck his brains out that I don't even know. And it's hard to explain why or how. But if you ask any abuse victim, they will tell you the same thing.
Well, and anecdotally, this is an anecdote, so it's one person. It's not a universal truth by any
Right.
means, but I've heard that this can be common. It's the idea that because one of the questions I was going to ask you was if like sex in the brothel, for example, was triggering, but based off of what you just said, it may not have been. And I don't know. I'll let you address that in a moment if you'd like. But what I've heard from the individual I'm referring to is that when you go through an experience like that and then you have sex again, you almost like what was that word you used earlier? Where you
Dissociate.
dissociate, yeah. And you're almost just like an item,
Right.
you know, and you're
That's,
like,
yes.
well, I guess I'll let them get their enjoyment out of me and I'll just stay still, which is really like I can't think of a good word to describe it, but you know, because I don't want to be insensitive, but it's horrifying. That was the word I was
Yes.
gonna say.
And what it's just when I was at the brothel, when you're going through trauma, you just try to survive it. You don't think I'm going through trauma. You're just in the moment trying to survive it. So the impact comes later. Like when I was at the brothels, I was just dealing with it. I thought, well, I can help the girls. I'll be there for them. Let them do what they want to do. If they want to go, they can go. I won't force anyone to go do a party if they don't want. I did listen to a lot of negotiations. And at the time I thought, wow, that's fucked up. But I wasn't traumatized then, but it's when you get out and you step back and take a look at the big picture, like what? And then you start having dreams and flashbacks and you start trying to avoid the triggers. Like I will never walk back into one of those places, and walking into the VA for me is a trigger. Now the Reno VA is wonderful. They know this. So when you walk into the Reno VA, you have the women's clinic on the left. You can walk right in, any woman veteran can walk into the women's clinic straight in there and get whatever help they need, which is good because they understand this. I avoid other veterans a lot. Sometimes when I go to the grocery store, because I live close, I'm 50 miles from Fallon. I see a lot of uniformed people now and then. I walk around them. I avoid them. I don't want to think about it. It's a lot of avoidance on certain things. Don't have any examples right now, but I don't go out a lot. Once a year I get a weekend somewhere and go out. I don't go to nightclubs or where I could possibly be harassed or assaulted, because that's the first thing I think about. And I overprotected my daughter too. I know I did. I was like a helicopter mom with her because I tried so hard not to let her have the same kind of life.
Yeah.
And it doesn't go away. All therapy does is teach you how to cope with it. I'm not going to tell anyone not to work in a strip bar or a brothel or join the military, because they're going to do it anyway. What's the point? It's just a warning. There was a time I'll go back to a time in Germany. The barracks had 4 floors. It was an old German barracks. It had a basement with the laundry room. One night on a weekend, there was a big drinking party down in the basement by the laundry room, and our company commander was there. His name was Captain Snap. He was a young, good-looking guy. They kept wanting me to go down there and drink with him, and there were no other women down there. In fact, a couple of them walked up to the door. Come on, we're having a party. I'm like, no, I'm going to get some sleep. I'll come. And finally I said, I'll come later. Well, it's a good thing I didn't go, because they got so drunk. They got in a big fight. A kid got beat up. The commander got relieved. God knows what would have happened to me if I'd have gone down there and started drinking. They were blackout drunk. There were parties all the time in the barracks like that.
Yeah. One thing that really stuck with me that you said a few minutes ago was, I can't remember how exactly you said it, but I remember the gist of what you said. It's the idea that you thought you'd be on a team,
Yes, I thought I
and
was one of them.
you'd think that the last person they would try to assault, let alone sexually assault, but harm, let's just make it about that. Not even specific to what happened. You'd think that the last person anybody on a team would want to harm is somebody on their own team.
Apparently
And I
not.
just can't wrap my head around that.
Apparently not. Women were lesser to a lot of people. I did the same job. I don't understand. I was working on computers when computers were as big as my whole kitchen, And I was working out of DOS when a lot of people never even heard of computers, and I was good at it. I had to memorize DOS commands to transfer the data and put the data in. And the warrant officer promoted me fast because I could handle when the other girls were gone. There was 2 other women. When they were gone, I handled the whole thing at 20 years old. And it's not like I didn't contribute, but you don't feel like you contribute enough. And after all the harassment and assault, I stopped contributing. I would just sit there sometimes and not do anything or go hide out. Here's another interesting tidbit. In the warehouse, they were huge. Like I said, they were German train stations from World War II. So there was tracks through there. Well, not only were there tracks, there was millions of dollars worth of parts missing. So the battalion commander and the 3rd Armored Division commander swore he was going to clean it up. So we were working around the clock, 7 days a week, holidays and everything, in uniform, doing our jobs. And come to find out, shortly after I left, I worked in Fort Lewis. I worked for a warrant officer who worked at the other Class 9 warehouse. I had actually done some exchanges with him when we were in the field. So he remembered me, told me that they discovered tunnels under that whole concern. Because, World War II, tunnels. Germans were coming up at night through the tunnels and stealing everything. And we had to pay for it. We got put through the ringer. They almost put us all out of the military. They almost demoted us. This was practically like extra duty. That's why they had people staying there 24 hours. And there was no drinking water, no running drinking water. The water was too bad to drink. The mess hall was like a 30-minute walk away if you wanted to eat. There was one gate guard, and nothing else was open. And no TV, no phone, no cameras. You just sat there. And if you were lucky, you could find a book, which was hard to find because they had no American bookstores. You had to have your family send it, or you'd have to learn how to read German.
And did you, or have you, again, asking this question for people that are listening, have you developed any coping mechanisms you may share? Some people say, like, try to ground yourself in your environment. So they say, look around, observe the smells, taste something. I can see your reaction to that, but honestly, have anything?
Well, I have a lot of hobbies.
Fair.
I crochet, so a lot of people get blankets and hats and stuff for holidays. I have a big fish tank that gets bigger all the time. 2 dogs, a cat, a bearded dragon. I taught myself astrology. I taught myself how to read tarot cards. I'm very intuitive. A lot of times I used to log on to sites and get paid to read cards on my spare time. Run errands. Like I said, I'm OCD. I'm constantly doing projects around the house. I've even painted my cabinets and refinished my counter and put floors down by myself, And I recently just cleaned out my garden to get ready for planting. I just keep busy, hobbies, just to try to keep my nose. And of course, I'm deeply, even though my daughter's on the other side of the country, I'm deeply involved in both of my kids. To the point, my 18-year-old son, I probably get on his nerves, but I'm always trying to take them places and be in their lives. And, my grandbaby, in June, I get to go see my grandbaby again. I'm just into my own thing. I'm still not very social unless I'm at work and I have to be. I kind of keep to myself. You'll see me out alone a lot. I can go sit in a casino for a couple hours by myself. A couple weeks ago, I was there for 11 hours, didn't even realize it. Drinking Coke and just
Drinking Coca-Cola, right?
Coca-Cola. Yeah, no, I don't do illegal drugs.
I thought I couldn't tell if you said drinking and Coke. So I was
no.
Okay, but anyways, speaking of drugs, like, I mean, you mentioned cannabis gummies tend to help at least with some of your maybe physical symptoms or something. Feel free to correct me on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, have you found any like relief and things like that?
Yeah. Well, Like I said, I drank for years. I tried in the stripping
And,
industry.
and I don't mean to cut you off, but did alcohol help? Like, because some people, especially cannabis people, they'll say, "Oh, alcohol's not a medicine," and I'm just like, I don't I don't totally agree with that. I don't totally disagree with
Yeah.
it either.
Well,
But did it help?
at the time, because weed was illegal,
Fair.
we couldn't
Yeah.
get it. I didn't do illegal drugs, especially as a mom. I didn't
Yeah.
want to I have cousins that had meth labs and went to prison, and I tried meth, but a lot of like hard drugs, I was lucky, and they made me vomit. My
Mm.
system would reject it right away. And I threw up a lot with alcohol, but I did it. How I got onto edibles is when it became legal and they opened a dispensary. My daughter turned me onto it. She got onto hard drugs and got off of them quickly, and she switched to weed. And she turned me on to edibles. For the first one I took, I felt like the whole earth was moving under my feet. But I take them at night before I go to bed. If I'm, it just shuts my brain down and helps me relax enough just to fall asleep. And I don't have side effects or hangovers. I get a little munchy. I have to go to the gym a lot because I love my cherry pie and salt and vinegar chips.
Yeah, the weed will do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's when I started doing edibles, and I just kind of stay there. I don't want a prescription. I'm already on asthma prescriptions, anything you can think of. I don't want to rely on happy pills. I tried them before and they didn't make me feel good. And they're hard to get off of too. You got to wean yourself off of them, or it could get quite ugly. So I stick with the natural stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's in and of itself, that's interesting for me to hear. I don't know if I've told you this, but this show is mostly focused on cannabis.
Mhm.
This, the sex work topic, and even this, I hope, is going to be another tangent.
Mhm.
Not because I guess just to clarify what I meant by that is I hope to bring more attention to this issue and make sure that people are aware of it and most importantly, how to deal with this.
Yes.
So I wanted to clarify what I meant by that.
I have definitely put your name out there in that site, and to my friend, it might take a little time for them to come around. Like I
Oh,
said, I'm
and yeah,
gonna.
like you say, I'm sure once we share this, it might
Mhm.
make people more or easier to consider it so that they can see like I'm just here to listen, to give you the space
Mhm.
to talk about whatever you want to talk about, and anything that's off board, then
Mhm.
we won't talk about it.
Well, you're gonna be well rounded in women by the time you're done with all of this. You're gonna see it's not easy to be a woman. I don't understand why men want to be a woman.
I'll tell you, just to put it on a little bit lighthearted of a note, a more lighthearted note, I meant to say. Yeah, no, I do not want to be a woman. Like, even just having and look, I'm not saying I don't like women. Like, I know plenty of great women, strong women, but the reason I think you all are strong is because what you're unfortunately sometimes forced to go through. And I'm not even talking about culturally, because that's
Mhm.
obviously awful, unacceptable. Everything you went through, unacceptable. But I'm just talking about like literally being a woman would be hard. And what I
Yeah.
mean by that is like periods, for example. I think that, sometimes people talk about men and the man flu. And what I've always said is I think the reason we get a harder flu or get sicker, I'm not saying we actually do. I'm saying that women, because they're so accustomed to once a month or at least once a
Mhm.
week, once a month, feeling like shit, that
Mhm.
whenever we feel like shit, it's like it's completely foreign to us. Where
Uh,
you're used to once a month, I'm gonna feel like shit for a week.
Yep.
And men, like when we feel sick, like we only get sick when we get sick. We don't have like a biological process that makes us sick.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get it. The best thing about menopause was no
You
more
done with that?
monthly feeling like shit. But I do have, uh, I've had, life hasn't been hard. I had a rough relationship with my stepdad, then the military, and then dancing, and then moving here, um, jobs and working as in a brothel as a manager. And it just takes its toll on you. And it's just a woman thing. And raising a kid alone, being abandoned that way, and having to provide for her. Then I had to shield her from what I was going through, try to give her a normal childhood. It's been rough, and my 60th birthday came up, so I'm officially a senior citizen, I think. So I don't care anymore. I'll tell people whatever they want to know. It's rough for women. Going back to our grandparents, I saw a meme. Why did our grandparents stay married? Well, all of my grandparents were miserable. My grandma divorced and was single. It was rough, but none of them seemed happy. It was just the fact that, a lot of times there were certain jobs women weren't allowed to do. They couldn't buy a home or open a bank account, or some even go to the doctor without their husbands there. We've come a long way, but because we've gotten out there and want to do things on our own, it seems like that they want to throw obstacles in our way because they don't like to see that. A lot of men, not all of them, want to keep us under their thumb. I sold roofing for 3 years, from 2004 to 2007, had my baby while I worked there. I was the only girl in the office. Again, I was sexually harassed. I had male roofers come in speaking Spanish with innuendos and sexual remarks. I had roofers come in, and I was working the counter, did not want me to handle their affairs and get them their parts or order their roofing. They would rather wait in a long line for the guy next to me who I trained. It's and I was getting paid $5 an hour less than the guy sitting next to me that I helped train on the office. That's a lot of stuff that we go through, and we're driven into poverty. If I left right now, I wouldn't be able to put a roof over my head or nothing. And it's a scary, scary feeling. So I'm dealing with PTSD and trying to heal from that. And we're used to it. We live it every day.
Yeah, that's super tough. I feel like I heard I don't know what this song is called, but I feel like I heard a military song playing in your house like 10 minutes ago. Like the
Oh,
song
really?
with the trumpet. Yeah, like I
It
think
might
it's
have
the
been in
Song of the Fallen Soldier or something like that.
I think my husband's in the back bedroom on the other side of the house watching more YouTube videos. He's a
Oh,
diehard
okay.
Trump fan. He loves Trump so much. If Trump wanted to move in on me, he would kick me out. Don't ask. I tease him. His daddy.
He's
That's
got
probably his TV.
Yeah, he's got Trump derangement syndrome. He's deranged for Trump.
Yeah. I mean, I ain't going to lie. I voted for him because these last 4 years were miserable for a lot of us. I had to work around some of these illegals, and they were scary when they'd come into my store. I don't agree with everything, but some of the stuff he's doing, like the government audit, I'm all for that. I want to know where my money goes,
Yeah.
but
Well,
I
the
don't
only
have.
thing. Oh, sorry. You said I don't have.
I don't have I'm a big Trump fan. I don't have a MAGA hat or a T-shirt. I don't even talk about politics to people. This is the most I've said about it to anyone outside of the house.
Well, I'll just say that he is. I have many different thoughts, but just to keep it sort of on brand and on topic, he's one of the few presidents that has kind of been openly, maybe not by his choice, but he let me just say it. He hired Stormy Daniels. He hired a sex worker. And so I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. That's literally the whole thought. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah,
But
well, everybody knows he's always had a silver spoon in his mouth when he was born. He's always been rich. He's always loved women. Look at the beauty pageant thing and everything else. He
yeah,
loves beautiful women, and he might have been quite a womanizer, but I don't care. I care about the job he's doing.
fair. Yeah,
We just do your job, because look what Bill Clinton did, in the Oval
right.
Office with a barely legal intern and all these stories about affairs and Epstein Island. I can't really say that they're true, because it's just on the news. I wasn't there, but people have come forward. I mean, a lot of these elites and politicians, none of them are clean. They've almost always had affairs, cheated, bought prostitutes.
Yep.
I'm willing to bet my money on it.
Yeah. Yeah, like I say, I only brought that up just
Yeah.
because I think it's a sign of how normal sex work has become,
Yeah.
where we've completely moved on about that. We're like, yeah, I mean, whatever type of thing.
If you want to do it, you can do it. And I'll tell you one thing about my dancing years. I'm not sure if I mentioned I had a couple sugar daddies in my time. But they were older men, and I didn't have sex with them because it was before Viagra. And most of them were older, and, they had erectile dysfunction like a lot of older men get. So I didn't have to worry about that. Now, if I had to do it now, oh, hell no. No, because they throw that pill around. At the brothels, we used to have these old men in their 80s sit in the parking lot for half an hour until their Viagra kicked in and then come in. I'm like, nope.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was just trying to look up back to a point you brought up earlier. I can't find anything for this Congress, but I just want to flag this for people's attention so that if they want to reach out to their elected representative, they can. It looks like in the past there was the MST Claims Coordination Act. I don't know if that's what you were talking about, but there was also the Dignity for MST Survivors Act. And like you said, it doesn't appear that either of these bills did go anywhere. But again, I'm bringing this up so that people can look this up themselves. And maybe even send it to their elected representatives. If you don't want to talk to me about it, that's fine. But you can I would absolutely encourage you to try to get, if you can, exercise your influence on your elected representatives to get something done to address this on a federal level, if you feel comfortable doing that, of course.
Yeah. Now that's kind of small, but I can tell you the name of it. I just popped it up. It's HR 6023.
Sure, 6023. All right, folks. Yeah, definitely look that up. Oh, and I just found it. I will display it on screen right now. Again, just trying to give people information so that maybe we can enact some positive, meaningful change out of this. And yeah, I'm displaying that on my screen right now. So if people want to look it up, like you said, HR 6023.
Yeah. Another thing, one trigger I had, there was a movie out. Have you heard of the movie The General's Daughter?
I have not heard of that movie.
It's an older movie, I think from the maybe 90s or so. I'm not sure. It was about a general's daughter who went in as an officer, and she was gang raped when they were on an exercise for training. I won't go into detail, but they raped her and they left her there. And her father, the general, had to cover it because his career was online, and she got murdered anyway. But that's a trigger. And Promising Young Woman is another recent movie about a woman in medical school. And it really shows how it affects your mind. It's might be fiction, but there's some truth to it. And then there's another movie called Bliss, not the one with Owen Wilson, but there's an older 90-something movie called Bliss that shows about a woman who was sexually abused and repressed some memories and how it affected her. It's almost parallel to what I've gone through.
Yeah, and I just want to say, for folks that are listening, once again, if you'd like to support Torin directly, I mean, maybe you can think of some other ideas, but I can think of no other way than purchasing and reading your book, Behind the Pole. If you search it up, it's Behind the Pole, The Truth About Exotic Dancing by Torin Rochelle. I'll have links in the show notes if you'd rather just click on something and have it take you to the bookstore or whatever. I highly recommend it. I read it in an afternoon, and I've read it again since then. Again, we discussed it on the show in the past. I'll have links to those interviews if you want to hear more of Torin's story. And Torin, is there anything else that you wanted to mention today that we haven't already discussed, just before we go?
Well, I could go on for days with examples, but I'm not going to. I think everybody will have the general idea. and a better, maybe even a better understanding of maybe why I am the way I am now. But I would like, if I could help one person understand and come forward and get help, then my job is done. And yes, I thought about writing a book. I was going to call it Goodbye Melvin, a story about love and military sexual trauma. And I will start it soon. It's just getting the money to publish it. So,
Well, when you do, you've got a place here to promote it. Happy to have you on and promote it, and I'll even buy a copy myself, of
well,
course.
thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Anything, like I say, to help support you, and like you said, I just hope that today we can impress upon anybody that may have gone through this experience that you're not alone.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I want people to know that it really did happen. And a lot of women that I talked to were brushed aside like I was, and even called whores. I mean, I had a friend who, 19-year-old, got drunk in the barracks. It's a co-ed barracks, and basically had a train pulled on her. And she was blackout drunk. And then they tried to put her out of the military and treated her like she was trash.
Yeah.
And you got to think of the mind of a young 18, 19, 20-year-old when they go in. They're a clean slate. They don't understand this and what they can do and how to handle it. So keep that in mind, because why didn't you go to the police? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? I was always told chain of command, and I believed them. I trusted my bosses when they told me there was no evidence and I would have to stay in Germany longer and all this other crap. And I should have called the police. I should have went to the hospital. I didn't know. And that's about all I have to say about it.
Yeah. And I think the only short thing I'll say, and we can close this conversation out, is that while unfortunately it may be, and this is super unfortunate, I wish it wasn't the case at all, but we're just acknowledging facts here. It may primarily affect women, but to your point, it may also affect men. And to that point, the person I was referencing earlier was a man.
It does happen. It does happen to men too, and women have not washed their hands. Women can take part of that too. It's happened to men and women, and it really messes you up.
Yeah.
Just like any assault. I'm not just saying military assault's valid,
Sure.
any kind of assault. But
Sure.
when you're in the military and you're far away from home, yeah. And anyway, that's all I have to say.
All right. Well, again, folks, if you want to reach out to me and share your story, colememo.com/contact. I would also recommend what Torin said earlier. Reach out to the VA. Reach out to the variety of hotlines that are available to you. If you're struggling with thoughts of suicide, be sure to seek out therapy. Call the suicide hotline. It's what these services are for. It's why we pay our taxes. And again, to that end, we pay our taxes to fund things like the VA. So please, if you're a veteran and you've gone through this, take advantage of those services. And I think that's a good note to end on.
Yep. All righty.
All right.
Beginning January 1st, 2020, the recreational use